Hey everyone, this is Karen from Blue Rooster Farm, and today we are back with part 2 of our bunny pillow tutorial. Last week I released part 1 of this video series on how to make this bunny pillow, and we made the block. So if you missed that, you're going to want to go back to that video and watch that first, and then come back to this video so you can see how to finish it up. So in this video today, we are going to be adding sashing, and then we're going to be adding a border. After your border goes on, you'll decide whether you want to make a quilt like a wall hanging quilt or a table topper. And if that's the case, you will just put a binding on it and be finished. If you're wanting to turn it into a pillow, I will walk you through how to make one with an envelope back and a quilt type binding around the outside edges. So stick around and we're going to get this project completed and give this poor little bunny a white fluffy tail. Now there's another page that we need to look at. And this block right here, if you're using this block for something else, you could just say it's finished. Now you still need to add your applique tail. But before you do that, you want to know what you're going to be doing with this, because I'm not going to add my applique tail until I have a piece over here, and that's one of our sashing pieces that I'm going to add. I'm going to square this block up to be 14.5-inch square, and that's unfinished, and so it'll be a 14-inch finished square. And in order to do that, we're going to need to add some sashing, and then after I add the sashing, we'll put our tail on, because if I try to put the tail in now, it's going to get messed up in our seam. So according to the directions, we are going to use background fabric, which is our white. We're going to need 2 strips that are 2¼ inch wide by 12.5. And remember, our block is 12.5 inches long. If yours is different, you would use your measurements. And hopefully it's right in there. But if it's different, use your measurements, and then you can trim to 14.5 once you've got your sashing on. And if you're using it for something else other than the pattern that we're using, that would be fine. We're going to be putting a border on it that has, you'll see what it is. It has some rounded corners on it. And in order to use that border, you'll need to make sure your measurement is the same as what mine is. So you can always change the border and just use a solid piece. That would be fine too. So let's see. So I've got 2 pieces that are 2¼ by 12.5 inches here. So one's going to go there, and one's going to go right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them right sides together, put a pin in a couple places just because it's a long stretch and I want to make sure the ends meet at the end. I don't want one sticking further out. And I'm going to go 1/4 inch away from the edge on both sides. Then I'll press it and I'll bring you back. Okay, so now I've got both side sashings on, and we are ready for the top piece. And these are a little bit thinner since our block was taller. These are 1.5 by 14.5-inch strips, and they're going to go down here and right here. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put right sides together, I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch away from the edge and 1/4 of an inch away from the edge, and then press them back. And there we have our 14.5 inch bunny block, all complete. Okay, now we're going to do the border. Now, if your block doesn't measure 14.5 and it's larger, you can trim it down to 14.5, but be sure you take the same amount off on both sides and the same amount off on both the top and the bottom, just to keep the bunny centered. If it's too small, it depends. If it's just like 1/4 inch too small or something like that, that's fine. If it's smaller than, gosh, 1/2 inch, you probably will want to do a different kind of border on it. You can try this one, but it may be too large and it may not look right. You could just do strips of fabric, but it should not be any larger than 1/2 inch off. It shouldn't really be any larger than 1/4 inch off, but depending on your seam allowance and whether you are keeping an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance. So we've got a 14.5 inch block. Now we're going to do the border. And so what I've done is I've gone to my fat 1/8 bundle and I picked out some of the fabrics that I want to use for the border. Now you can use all one fabric, or you can make it scrappy like I'm going to do. If mine were fat 1/8 and I might have just barely enough, I'm not sure, but it would take really close to a fat 1/8 worth of fabric for this border, and it may not be enough. So I've chose 4 of the fabrics in this line of fabric, and I think these will look really nice for the border. And this is just kind of giving you a color look. I thought all of these colors were found in the bunny. I'm not using any fabric that was in this block. I chose separate fabrics and I thought those look nice. So choose what you like and what coordinates nicely with your bunny block. So you're going to cut 20 3-inch squares, 20 of these. And I've cut approximately the same number of each colorway. Then you're going to cut 4 blocks that are 3 inches by 4.5. Okay. You're also going to cut 40 of these 1 1/4 inch square pieces from background fabric. Now, what we are going to do is our border is going to be kind of scalloped, and we are going to snowball the corners of our square pieces, not all of them, just 2 of the corners, to give it that scalloped effect. And so what you're going to be doing is you're going to be putting 2 of your white squares on all of your 3-inch squares except for 4. You want to keep 4 of these squares to use as the cornerstones. So I will probably keep 1 of each color out and have 1 of each color in mine. If you want to do one that's a color, the same color, that's fine. You figure out what you like. You might even try laying it out a little bit to see what you like. But you'll need to keep 4 of them out and not snowball them. So I would keep 1 of each color on mine. Now you're going to snowball all the rest, and that will be, looks like 16. You'll be snowballing 16, and basically you'll just be putting these corners on, and I would do this by chain piecing so it'll go really quickly. I would just start sewing from this corner and go here, lift up my presser foot, go here, put this one in, go here, lift up my presser foot, go here, put this one in, and never cut my thread. And I would just have a long string of these pieces coming out the back end. And then when I had all of them snowballed like this, I would cut the threads in between them, trim, and press. when you press your blocks, if you want your blocks to nest, you need to alternate one that's pressed toward the print side and one that's pressed toward the background fabric. And you need to do the same on all of your blocks. So on mine, the right side has it pressed toward the fabric or the 3-inch block. The left one is pressed toward the background fabric. So all of mine would need to be pressed exactly like this. And also you're going to be cornerstoning these two just like this, and I'll show you again in just a second. But all of them need to be pressed like this if you want them to nest, so it's really easy to sew them together. So I've got that one already finished. Now when you do your rectangular ones, you want to snowball. You want to snowball on the long side, these two corners right here. Don't snowball the short side. Don't snowball the ones that go across. Snowball the ones that are on the long side, just 2 of them, just like that. And they can be added to your chain when you're chain sewing all of these together. So when you finish, you're going to have 16 of the 3-inch blocks and 4 of the rectangular blocks all snowballed in 2 corners. Then you're going to have 4 of the plain squares left over. And I will bring you back when I get mine all snowballed, and I'll show you how we're going to lay it out. I have snowballed all of my blocks and my rectangles. I still have the 4 for the corners that are not snowballed. And what we're going to do is we're going to figure out how we want to lay these out. So we're going to use one of the rectangles in the middle. So it's going to be like this. Then you can choose your fabrics. Whoops, that one's not ironed. Let me get one that's ironed. There we go. We're going to use our fabrics. And remember, we've got a seam allowance in here, so they're going to be too long right here now because the seam allowance is not taken up yet. And we can just figure out how we would like to place them. You can do that or that. You can just do them randomly. And if you have one color, it's going to be really easy. And so you're going to figure out how you want to place them. And then you're going to be sewing them together like this. And then you're going to flip it right sides together like this. And the same on down. And when you are finished, you will have a strip that looks like this, and it should measure 14.5. Get that in there for you. There you go. Okay, so that's what we've got here. Now on the top and the bottom, you're going to do another one like this over here. And it doesn't have to be the same colors, but you're going to have a center. You're going to have 2 of the snowballed blocks on each side. Then at the top, we're going to do a center. We're going to do 2 blocks on each side, and then we're going to do the cornerstone. I've got one right here. And I don't think I'm going to be using this one here. I'll probably be putting this one in a different place just because that red one is right there. So I will probably go over here with it. Okay, so there is our block here, and this one with the cornerstone is going to measure up with that block there. And what you're going to do is you're going to put your side blocks or your side strips on first. And we'll do this one here. And then I'll do another one here. Then after my side strips are on, I will take the strips that have the cornerstones on them, and I will put them on, and I will lay them right sides together, so 1/4 inch away from the edge. And then when I flip them back, we'll have that on. Now, on your pressing, I just pressed all of these in one direction, but when it comes to this right here, the cornerstones, I left those unpressed, so when I get to putting them on, I can turn them whichever way I need to so that the seams will nest, and that'll be easy to do. So I am going to go and finish putting together my border for the top, or for the side and the bottom. I'm going to attach the 2 sides. I'm going to attach the top and the bottom, and I'm going to bring you back. And here is our finished bunny rabbit topper. Now we have one thing left. We have a tail to put on. And if you wanted to put an eye on, you can, but I would wait until after you've quilted it. You could use a button for an eye, and like we talked about earlier, I think that's really pretty that we have a flower right there where his eye would be, so I don't think I'll be putting anything there. But for the tail, I have a 2-inch template that I think looks about the right size for this bunny. Now, if you want to make it bigger, you want to make it smaller, that's completely up to you. I will try to include the template in the cutting directions if I don't forget. So this is a 2-inch circle, and you can use fabric. I had an old Chanel blanket, and I tried finding a spot that had quite a bit of the fluff on it, and so that's a Chanel bunny tail. I had another spot that was bigger, and I tried it, and again, I kind of think that's a little too big for what I like. You might like it that way. It's just up to you. I could trim it down, but there's these bare spots right here. I don't know if you can see them very well, and so I didn't care for that much. The Chanel that I have doesn't have, it has a lot of open spaces and then stripes and just a little bit of places where the stripes are thicker. And this one right here had all stripes and it barely was 2 inches. So I was able to cut that one out, and that one looks good. So I've got that one. Then also you could use like Minky. Minky would be pretty. And so there's a white Minky tail. And of course you could make your tails any color you want. So I'm deciding between these two. If you want to use fabric, what I would do I would probably put Wonder Under or some of the other backing, the adhesive backing, to adhere it and give it a little more stability. With these, because this is polyester, I have tried using, I guess it's the Heat and Bond is the other one, Heat and Bond, and it does make those dots flatten down because they'll adhere to that Heat and Bond too. So I didn't like that. So I just ended up using a little Elmer's glue stick, putting it down and putting a pin in it and not ironing it, just letting it dry just for a few minutes. And then we're going to be doing a blanket stitch or a zigzag stitch or a straight stitch around the edge. So I need to decide between these two. This one, again, you could use the Wonder Under or the Heat and Bond, but when you press, these get all flattened out really bad. So I think I would also use, for this one, some glue, and that way I won't have to refluff all this from ironing it. So I've got to make a decision. Let me see. And as you see, I am not just keeping it totally on the bunny. I'm crossing over this seam just a little bit, so that's covered up. And that looks pretty good. You can position it any way you like. Again, if you want a little bit bigger, go ahead and make it a little bit bigger. That's fine. But I think I'm going to keep mine about that size. So I might use this one because I already have one that I used the minky on. So I think for this one, I'm going to go ahead and use this. And what we're going to do is, let's take a glue stick, and this is just the washable school glue, and let's put that on the back, and this will turn clear when it dries. And you'll want to put a pretty good amount. This is textured on the back with those stitches. Position it to where you want it. Let's see, these are kind of stripes, so do I want the stripes going that way? I think I'll do mine at an angle. And you can push down, and then you might give it a minute and let it dry. And I'll have to refluff that when I finish sewing. And I can even put a pin in it. Okay, so after a few minutes, what we're going to do is we're going to bring it to the sewing machine, and we're going to select whatever stitch we want to attach it to. I like the blanket stitch. If you have a zigzag stitch on yours, it's easy to do a zigzag stitch. Just work with the size, just manipulate the size to a good size. If you want to just do a straight stitch and let it fringe on the edge, that would be fine too. But I think I'm going to go ahead and do a blanket stitch. So I'm going to do that, and I'll bring you back when I've got it done. And there's our cute little bunny tail right there. And I just fluffed it up. Just took a little pin and just fluffed it up. And I think that looks really cute. Now, if you have other ideas, leave them in the comments. I'd love to hear what other ideas you have for a bunny tail. That way our viewers can have some other choices. Now, you certainly could have waited and did your bunny tail after you had it quilted, but I'm going to be machine quilting mine, and I know it's just going to have 1 or 2 strings going across, and I'll just fluff it up after I do my quilting. But you can certainly add it after it's quilted. So I think this is ready to be quilted. I'm going to do it on my long arm. If you do not have a long arm, which most people don't, you can easily quilt this on your sewing machine. You can do straight line stitches every 1 inch or 2. You can do angled stitches, again, however far apart you want. You can do crosshatch, which means you go the other way too, and that leaves little diamonds in there. You could do stitch in the ditch, or you can stitch 1/4 inch away from each of those stitches on both sides, and that would look really cute. Whatever you want to do, all of those would be really cute. Now, if you're going to do a pillow, you don't need to have a fabric backing. You can just use batting and just have that be your backing. If you want to go ahead and have a backing fabric, an old piece of backing fabric, that's fine, but no one's going to see inside your pillow, so just the batting would be fine. If you're going to make it into a table topper, then you would want to put a fabric layer and then the batting. And you would want to make sure that you cut the fabric and the batting at least 1 inch or 2 on all sides, larger, and that will work really well. So I will stitch mine up on my long arm, and then I'm going to bring you back and I'll show you how to turn this into a pillow. And I just took this off of the long arm and I trimmed it up, and it is all quilted. I used a pretty little floral with squiggly lines for my quilting. And I had told you earlier that you don't have to have a piece of fabric for your backing because it's going to be enclosed in the pillow. I have one on here because when I was long arming, I was doing lots of other pieces and small pieces as well as this one right here. And it was easier for me just to lay this one down with the other little quilts that I was quilting and just quilt it right then and there instead of doing it separately. So you don't have to have a backing fabric. The only reason you'd have a backing fabric is if you were making this into a topper, a wall hanging, or something else where the backing would be seen. So this is what it looks like. I measured mine and it's about a scant 19 inches square. If you wanted to trim it down to be a little smaller, you could do that. You've got all of this wiggle room. It would just reduce your border, so you can trim it to the size you want. And I think he turned out really, really cute. Now remember, if you're wanting to add an eye, like with a button, or if you want to embroider an eye on, you could do that at this time. I'm not going to add any eye. I think that flower is super cute right there. That worked out perfect. So we're going to turn this one into a pillow, and we're going to put binding on the pillow. So we're going to do it kind of like we do a quilt, but we're going to do a pocket backing. And so I'm going to turn this over and we're going to work from the back. Now I have cut 2 pieces of fabric for the back envelope. And let's see, I need to have it face up. This is a white on white, so there is a right side to this one. If you are using a solid, there is not a wrong or right side, so you just lay it down. But you want the right side up, because this is what it's going to look like when it's all put together. Okay? And I'm just laying it on there so I can make sure it fits, and it does. Now you'll see that I only have an inch overlapping here. If I weren't getting ready to do an added cuff to this, you would certainly want this to overlap by at least that much, because you need a spot for your pillow to go in, but you also need it to close back up so that the pillow's not poking out at the back. But we're gonna do a little decorative cuff on this and make it look really cute from the back. So what I have is a piece of fabric that I have from the collection, and it is the 1/8 yard cuts. Remember, this is a 1/8 yard cut bundle, and I just took one piece. I kept it the same 9 inches, and I trimmed it to my scant 19 inches. So you want to make sure that it matches the height of your pillow. So everything should be matching. So if you had a 20-inch pillow when you were finished, you would make sure that you are going 20 inches. Now, I also want to tell you, like I said, I have about an inch overlap. You could figure it that way. If yours is about 19 inches too, these I cut at 10 inches. So 10 by 19. Okay. So we're going to do our cuff, and you decide which one you want to have as your cuff. It doesn't matter. I'm going to pull this aside for right now. And if you'll remember the magic pillowcase video that I did, we're going to use that same method. And I like this because it covers up your seams and it makes a really pretty cuff on the back of your pillow. So it doesn't matter on this one, this top fabric, if it's facing up or facing down, but you do want to make sure the cuff fabric is facing up. So you're going to match it up to the top here. Then you're going to roll this until it's past the halfway mark. And then you can take pins, or you can take clips, whatever you like to use. And we're going to take this and we're going to go ahead and match it up to the top edge. So we should have 3 pieces of fabric that are matched up at that top edge, and we are just going to pin. And I'm first going to put one on the middle, one on each end, and then I'll add a couple in the middle there. Now, the only thing you have to be careful of when you're sewing this is that you get all 3 pieces of material in that seam. Otherwise, they'll pop out. And I'm going to sew about a 1/2 inch seam. Okay, so I'm going to go to my sewing machine. I'm going to sew 1/2 inch away from the edge of my fabric, and then I'll back stitch here. We'll lock those stitches in. I'll be right back. So before I flip this, I'm going to make sure that I see that inside piece stitched into this cuff, and I do. If you don't see it, that means it slipped, and you're going to need to pick out that spot and pull it out and then restitch it. So this should be real easy now. We're just going to take one end, and we are just going to turn this outside cuff inside out. At the same time, we're going to pull the white fabric. And there we have a cuff that has a finished edge on both sides. And that is why it didn't matter which direction we had that fabric. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the iron, and I'm going to make sure that I have pressed that out really nicely. And I want that seam to go up this way. And then what we're going to do is we're going to top stitch. So let me press this, and then I'll show you where we're going to top stitch. So I pressed it, and then I put a top stitch right there on the edge, and that will hold it in place nicely so it won't get all wonky. And now we're ready to pin it to the top of the pillow. So let's take our pillow top and make sure you see which way it's going. My rabbit its head's up here. And so what we want to do is we want to decide, do we want the cuff, since this is a square pillow, we could choose, do we want the cuff here, 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 or here? I don't know that there's a right way for these or not, but I'm going to go ahead, let me get this one so it's right side up, okay? And make sure I choose the right side up on this one. And as you can see, it's the same on both sides. So here's the right side up. Okay. So I'm just laying it so it matches all the edges. And now we have a nice overlap of about that much. So that'll give us plenty of room to get the pillow in, yet it will also keep it from bulging out once we put the pillow in. So what we can do now is we could either use clips or we can use needles or pins. And I think I'm just going to use my pins here. And I am going to pin, first of all, right where that seam hits the topper. Okay. Then I'm going to pin in the corners, and this one right here I got off a little bit. Let me scoot that over. I'm going to pin in the corners. And up here. And we can put one here in the middle of each side. And then I'm going to also pin where this laps over. Now when I am stitching this, I'm going to stitch about a 1/2 inch away from the outer edge just to make sure it's nice and secure and that I get all the pieces of fabric in. I am also going to go here, go back, and go over this area a couple of times. This right here is going to get a lot of pull right there, and so we'll go over it a couple of times here, and we'll go over it a couple of times here. Make sure you go out to the white, cross over because that's where the pull is going to be, right there. And so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go all the way around 1/2 inch away from the edge. I'll bring you back when I have that done. All right, so I've gone around about 1/2 inch away from the edge, maybe just right inside, maybe about 3/8 inch, just something like that. That way you can make sure that you catch everything. And when you're done, just check and see if you need to trim anything off. Go ahead. Looks like mine looks good. Now we're going to bind it just like a quilt. Now mine is 19 inches and I plugged 19 inches into the online binding calculator, and you can just Google binding calculator and it'll come up, and you can just plug in the size of your quilt, the thickness of your strips, and the width of the fabric that you're going to use, and it'll tell you how many strips to cut and what yardage you will need to have enough binding for a project. All I needed to know was how much around I needed, and I need 86 inches total binding, a strip that's 86 inches long. And so I am using the scraps that I had left over, and I've got some different sizes, and I think I will also probably cut these just in probably this size, maybe in half, just kind of random sizes. And I'm going to sew those together end to end. And remember, on a binding, we don't like to just sew across like this because that adds too much bulk. We're going to do a diagonal seam, and we lay it across like this, kind of like a capital A. We match up the edges, and then we go from corner to this corner under here. You can draw a line and you can sew on that, and then when you flip it back, you've got a nice straight strip. And when you fold this in half, the seams won't be laying on top of each other. So I'm going to piece all of my pieces together and trim it up. Then I'm going to fold it all in half like this, and I'll bring you back. And here is my binding, all pressed and pieced together. Again, I connected them at a diagonal, and then I pressed the seam allowance open. That way we won't have the bulk. Now, if you're doing a scrappy binding, you are going to have more bulk because you have a lot more seams. So it may be just a little bit trickier to sew because of the thickness, and it may be a little trickier on the corners. Sometimes those corners end up where the seam is. It's not hard, but you just have to be aware that you're going to have a little more bulk there. Okay, so to sew this on, I am going to take my binding, and here's the open end of it right here. And I am going to lay it so that it's about a little more than 3/4 of the way across. I'm going to start sewing probably right here, and I'm going to be going around. Now remember, when you get to the edge of this corner right here, you're going to go off the edge at the corner, or you can stop 1/4 inch away from your edge over here, either way, but I just like to go ahead and go off. Then you're going to pick up your tail of your binding, and you are going to make it go perpendicular to your binding. It's also parallel here, or actually right in line with your other edge. You're going to fold it back, you're going to hold it, and you can see right here I've got a seam right here, so I am going to have a little bulk here. Then you're going to fold it just like that, and I'm going to continue sewing until I get to the other corners, and I'll do the same thing. And when I get to the end, I'll bring you back and show you how I put the two ends together. Okay, so I've gone all the way around, and I'm right here where I started. I do want to remind you that we did have about a 1/2 inch seam all the way around. So when you add your binding, you want to make your stitch just a slight bit bigger or right on the line so that that stitch can't be seen. So make sure you go wider than your seam that you attach the backing to the front on. And I went just about a little over 1/2 inch, and that's fine. We've got a 2.5 inch binding, and so when you fold it in half, it is 1¼ inches, and that will still be fine. We'll have plenty of binding to go around. If you make your binding smaller, it will be hard to pull that in though. So we're going to connect our binding pieces, and what we're going to do, so here's where I started, here's where I've ended, and I'm going to bring you down just a little bit. Okay, so we want it to end up like this and sewn together. So what we're going to do is we are going to cut off. I'm going to try to get this piece a little shorter because that's really close to this. So I'm just going to cut off about right here. Okay. Now when I open this up, this is the thickness, 2.5 inches of my binding. And that's how much I want to overlap my two pieces of binding, because when we stitch on the diagonal, that will make it lie flat. So I want to kind of pull them tight, because I find that the binding seems to have a little bit more looseness and will tend to buckle if I don't go just a hair bit shorter. So here is the edge of this binding piece over here, right here. I'm going to lay this with the 2.5 inch width. It's 2.5 inches from here to here, right there. Then I'm going to lift up this tail here, and I need to cut, so it's right there. I need to cut the overlap to be that 2.5 inches. Now, I cut like a nickel's thickness shorter. Like a nickel's thickness. Not much shorter, but just a little, because I find that this binding is usually more likely to get gappy than the quilt. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to even that up just a little bit. Make sure it's straight. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up, stick my fingers inside each of those binding fabrics. I'm going to pick them up. I'm going to lay this one back, this one forward. And this, at this point, you kind of need to bring your quilt together a little bit. And sometimes I use a clip and just clip it there so it's not in my way, and I'll do that. So I just have these big clips, and I'll just clip it like that so I'm not having to hold it. Then we're going to put a pin at this top corner, because that will be out of our way when we sew, and a pin on this bottom corner. And we are going to be sewing right from this corner to this corner, and it's just a diagonal line. And you can draw that line if you need to. I have seam tape, so I'm just going to follow my seam tape, and then I'll bring you right back. Okay, so now if you've seen my other videos when I'm doing this binding and connecting it, I like to talk about the capital A. So this looks like a capital A. You got going up, going down, and then this is the stitch it goes across, like the line on the capital A. And I've stitched that. We can remove our pins. And before we trim this corner off, let's make sure it lays flat. Yes, it's not twisted. So now let's cut this corner 1/4 inch away from that seam. We are going to finger press it flat and open. And then close it. And now I'm going to pin it, and we are going to sew this down. I'll bring it back when it's sewn down. And we have it It's all sewn down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it to my ironing board, and I am going to press all of this back so we don't have any pleats on our binding. And when I come back, I'm going to show you how I glue based my binding down and how I top stitch it with the sewing machine. I'll be right back. All right, it's all ironed, so I don't have any pleats where the pillow meets the binding. And now we're going to be pulling the binding over the edge of the fabric and securing it with some Elmer's school glue. So I'm going to put an ironing mat right here, and I'll just iron and everything right here. So what I do, I am going to go in this direction. So I'm just going to start here, and I take my Elmer's glue and I just put it on the seam allowance there, and I can move you up closer. All the way to the corner and then down just a little bit. Then I take and I fold my binding down so I cover up that seam that I made when I sewed the binding on. Just go right over it, just barely. Then the heat from my iron, I'm not using a wet iron, just a dry iron. The heat from my iron will dry that glue real quickly. And this isn't going to leave anything that will cause your needle to be sticky. It works very well. It does wash out, but it can stay in because this is a pillowcase. It probably won't get washed too often. So now we've got to there. This is where I like to use my stiletto, and this is just a clover stiletto, and it's very handy. I like to put it right there and bring it over. Got some threads there, I'll stick those in. And that will make a nice corner. Now, do you see how I have a seam right there? And I talked about this scrappy binding has a lot more seams, and you know, of course, almost every corner I hit a seam. But that's okay. It's just going to be a little bulky right there. So let me go ahead and put some glue over here. And I don't go a long distance. I probably go 12 to 18 inches down on a quilt if I'm doing a big quilt. And then I just start holding that. And then again, let's get back up here. We'll pull that together. And this also has a nice point that helps you pull the fabric. So if I needed to pull it just a little bit, see how that will just grab that fabric and pull it. And I'm gonna go ahead and get my iron before I pull that down. And this is a cordless iron. It is a Panasonic, and it's for quilters. There's different styles of this, and this one says for quilting. And it does not have a cord. It has a stand that it sets in, and it's really handy. Now, if you're going to be ironing like a big quilt and you're going to have the iron off the stand for a little bit, it's not good for that, because it does not have a battery in it that is keeping the heat. It is cooling down as you sew. It just keeps it hot while it's on the stand. So I have on my big ironing board a regular electric iron for big projects that I need to spend a lot of time with the iron, like a big quilt, pressing a big quilt. But these small projects like this and just pressing blocks, it is so handy. And it's steam too, and there's a good steam amount that comes out. So I like it very much. And it's great for when I need to do these tutorials. I can keep my camera right where it is. I don't have to move it. And as you see, I'm just doing the same thing on that corner. This one is one of the only ones probably that did not have a seam, and it's much easier to get it to stay down. And again, dry iron. When you use a wet iron, it just moistens up that glue again. And it is purple, but once it dries clear. And I don't even know if they have clear glue anymore. I know when I went and bought this, I did not see any clear school glue. I know a lot of people are using Elmer's school glue for basting quilts and all of that too, because that works well. There is another type of Elmer's glue. I don't know if it's home or there's different kinds of Elmer's glue, I know that, but there's one that looks really similar to this, but it's not school glue. So make sure it's the school glue, because that's the one that is washable and it will wash out. And I do find that as a teacher, whenever the kids used the stick glue, it would only last for so long before whatever they glued down started falling off. So it's not a great glue for permanent gluing, but it's great for kids. We are just about around. We've got 2.5 sides done. And you could put the glue on the binding, that would be fine. I just go ahead and use the edge of the seam allowance there, because it's the part that's sticking out. It's easier to get my glue stick on. And remember, just go right past that seam. You want to cover that seam up by just a teeny tiny bit. And this one right here, it's right on that corner. You can see that seam, so it's really bulky. I'll probably need to put a clip on that, and when I get to that, I can maneuver it with my stiletto on the machine. And if you need to pull it off, you just pull it off and reposition. Very friendly glue. So we are just about done here. Now, I have just started using the glue on these small projects, and it's actually very handy because it just, once I get this glued, I just zip it down the side with my sewing machine and it goes very fast. It's easy to do the straight sewing on this piece. And again, we're going to be sewing right next to that edge of the binding. And we're on our last piece right here. And that one is right there on the did not plan that one out, did I? Oops, and I pushed the steam button. Didn't mean to do that. Not thinking. All right, we have all of this basted down. Now I'm going to go to my machine and I am going to sew right there on that edge as close as I can without going off. And You can use whatever color thread you like. I have white in my machine and I've been using white for everything. So that would probably be the one that I'll use because, you know, if I use blue, then it's going to go across these other colors and be funny, you know. So I'm just going to stick with white on this one since I have a bunch of different colors going on. And also when I sew on when the stitches are on the back, I usually hit about the ditch and sometimes just a little outside of the ditch, and the white will blend in perfect right here. So I'll bring you back when I've got the binding all sewn on. And there we have our completed pillow, and as you can see, I just sewed right along that edge and it just went so smoothly. Now at the corners, since they're bulky, you just have to go really slow. You don't want to break a needle or anything, and sometimes your presser foot gets kind of hung up. You just use your stiletto and just kind of put it under the presser foot and just pull that fabric as you're sewing, and that helps. But I think it looks really nice. Our pocket in the back. And let's go ahead and try putting a pillow in it. Now, I like to use bigger pillows than what these take. And I'm not a polyfill kind of pillow girl. I like feather pillows, and they just seem to look nicer and fluffier, and they conform to the right shape and they stay fluffy. So I like to get feather pillows, and you can buy them on Amazon. It goes in there nicely. And then once your pillow's in there, you want to make sure that it goes to the corners because that will make it look a lot nicer. And since we've been pushing this way, all the stuffing seems to be there, so we'll just work some of it down this way. And you can see how much pull I'm giving to this pillow, so that's why you need to make sure you have good seam allowances and good back stitches here, because that takes a lot of pull. All right. And since it's a feather pillow, you know, it kind of flattens out. There it is. And I need to work some more of the feathers down into these corners. So this one right here, that should do it. The one thing I want to say is I had a selvage on my pillow here, and I forgot to address that. If you don't have a selvage on your pillow, you just need to turn under that edge and do a small stitch, or you can also use a serger and stitch that down. But I completely forgot to say that while I was making this. So I had the selvage and I just left it because no one's going to see it and it won't ravel. So there we have it. I'll bring you back and show you a view sitting on the couch. I wanted to share with you one of the other fabric colorways that I put this in. And this one I made before I made the one with you. And there's a few things that I changed up when I made the one with you, because one of the things I like to do when designing a block is to try several different layouts and things and then decide which one I like the best and then sew it up and see if it works out the way I think it will. And this is one of them that I had made and I really liked it. I think the only thing that I did differently was, it seems like the border I made a little bit bigger, the border around the bunny. And that then changed my squares, and so these were all the same, and the ones that we just made, we had the bigger one in the middle. But this was a fun one, and I also had the carrot going down. And like I said, you can do it whichever way you want. Here I used the minky and just a different colorway. Now on this one, I am not turning it into a pillow. This one I think I will hang on our front door. And I put these little pockets in the back. And all that is, I think this is a 6-inch square, and I just folded it in half, and then I sewed it in, and then I put the binding on around it. So it just will be like that. And what I'll do is I'll take a dowel and I'll just set it in there. It'll go from corner to corner, and then I can just hang it with a little nail and let the dowel hang on the nail. Or I can put something, a hook or something on that dowel to let it hang. But I think this one turned out real well. And I did put my my tag on that one. I got it on that one. I didn't put my tag on the pillow just because I thought it was kind of bulky already and I didn't want it to be sticking out. So I didn't think I needed to put a tag on a pillow. But this is one of them, and you can see that different colorways look different. And I think this one looks very vintage-ish. It reminds me of the colors when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, and very pinks and purples and things like that. And then I used some vintage fabric around the border and here, and I thought that looked pretty. So there's different things you can do with this block, and this is just 2 of the ideas that I have for you today. So I hope you enjoyed seeing how I made this block. And remember, in the description box below, you will find cutting directions and layout ideas for the bunny. It is a free download, so all you do is just click on it and you can print it out. I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I hope that you're finding time to sew. And if you have any questions, don't forget to leave them in the comment box. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.